Finally, under the combined attack of the Allies, the German army started to crumble, to fall back, to run from battle. Germany was at the mercy of the Allies. General von Ludendorff, the German chief of staff and virtual dictator, was forced to send a secret message to the Berlin government. The offer of peace must be transmitted immediately. The army cannot wait another 48 hours. The Allies could grant the armistice or fight on to unconditional surrender. Georges Clemenceau, the wartime French leader, urged that the Allies should march triumphant into Berlin. Our own General Pershing said, "Complete victory can only be obtained by continuing the war until we force unconditional surrender." But the world would not listen. So golden was the thought of peace that the armistice was granted. We celebrated. Not only because the war was over, but because it seemed that we had put an end to German militarism forever. Hadn't the German army been beaten? Hadn't the German plan for conquest failed? Hadn't the Kaiser had to run away to Holland, and his war leader, Ludendorff, to seek refuge in Sweden? And wasn't Germany now a republic, apparently like our own, based on liberty and equality? Didn't that prove that Carl Schmitt had rid himself of the old German tradition? That's what your father thought as he celebrated in 1918. But let's see what had really happened. When defeat was imminent, the men who had caused the war stepped conveniently into the background, leaving the weak opposition parties to take over. That was how, overnight, Germany became a republic. It had elected representatives, all the appearances of democracy. But beneath the surface, the old German system went on as before. The state officials of the Kaiser's empire were the state officials of the new republic. The industrialists of the empire ran the industry of the republic. Even the same teachers presided over the same classrooms, preaching the same gospel of nationalism and German racial superiority. And above all, the general staff of the empire continued to function, even though secretly. The old Germany still lived, and Carl Schmitt, too, had never really changed. In the first place, he never believed that his armies had been defeated. During the 4 years of the war, he had been told only of an unending string of victories. News of defeat had been kept from him. And when the fighting ceased, wasn't his glorious army still on foreign soil? Germany itself still uninvaded? And because Germany was granted an armistice instead of being forced to unconditional surrender, Carl Schmitt never saw Allied soldiers marching through his capital. Instead, the German army home again after the armistice, bands playing, colors flying. Like the army of Frederick the Great, like Bismarck's army. Certainly not like a conquered army. Why then had Germany signed an armistice, Carl Schmitt asked himself. Why, a year and a half later, what he called the shame treaty of Versailles? Why was Germany, in his judgment an undefeated Germany, accepting the penalties of defeat? Bitter, sorry for himself, Carl Schmitt was looking for a scapegoat. He found one. The one the German war leaders had always planned that he should find. Carl Schmitt never blamed the men who had caused the war. Instead, he blamed the men who had signed the peace. Thus, in Carl Schmitt's distorted thinking, the ill-fated German Republic meant a bunch of traitors that had stabbed the fatherland in the back. And the general staff, the great landowners, the industrialists, the state officials smiled contentedly. Not only had they escaped blame themselves, but they had smeared the idea of democracy in Germany. It was a blow from which it would never recover. Carl Schmitt would go back to the old tradition, the tradition of Frederick and Bismarck and the Kaiser, the tradition of militarism and war. But wasn't the Versailles Treaty designed to prevent Carl Schmitt starting another war, even if he wanted to? By this treaty, the Germans agreed to disband the general staff, to limit their army to 100,000 men, to hand over their fleet, to demilitarize the Rhineland and coastal fortifications. They bound themselves never again to build an air force or submarines. And to enforce the treaty, Allied troops were to occupy the west bank of the Rhine, the Cologne sector for 5 years, the Koblenz sector for 10, the Mainz sector for 15.